What happens in this house stays in this house. Therapy, I don't got time for that. That's a white people problem. I don't need therapy. I got Jesus. What you so sad about? You don't gotta pay no bills up in here. If you heard any of these sayings growing up, I can almost guarantee that you feel really uncomfortable talking about your mental health. In fact, you might be struggling and don't even know that there's a problem. I say, if everything that your culture has taught you about mental health ain't working, might be time to start looking outside of it. Talkticians, welcome and welcome back. My name is Tatiana. I am a passionate mental health advocate and I teach communication strategies to help you master conflict resolution. In today's video, we're going to take a look at some unique approaches around the globe that can support us in our mental health journey. So, what is culture? The attitudes, beliefs, and opinions of a particular group. I am all for culture. I love it. I think that it instills some amazing things in us: generosity, hard work, pride, heritage, connection to community. So I'm not here today to demonize culture, but I do want us to understand that it does have blind spots and there's good and bad to everyone's culture. I want to highlight some of the things that I have seen and I have heard over the years from other cultures around the globe that I think can really help to support us in our mental health. So, what can other cultures teach us about mental health? Well, for one, let's start off the list talking about spirituality. Spirituality as a mental health tool. Spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, reading religious texts, going to synagogue or church or any kind of religious gathering, those are things that can offer peace, structure, and connection. Now, me personally, my experience growing up in church taught me that I was not to really associate with other people for fear of being corrupted or being punished. However, as I matured and I started to ask more questions, I learned very quickly that you can't truly love God's people without first trying to understand them. So, I highly encourage you to seek knowledge outside of your religious or your belief system, especially if separation is something that's being taught. I'm not telling you to convert. I am simply encouraging you to learn. Start asking some questions. How do other faith groups see sin? What do they talk about in terms of money management? How do they view mental health? What practices, what spiritual practices do they engage in that help to lessen things like anxiety and depression? If the idea of stepping outside of your religion or your thought process scares you, I get it because I was right there with you. But I want to challenge you and say that let this be an opportunity to tune into that fear and figure out why. Sometimes that outside wisdom actually helps you to return to your faith with a deeper understanding and appreciation. So don't be afraid to learn more about spirituality and its practices and how it can benefit your mental health. Another thing that I've learned from other cultures is that they have a real respect for both rest and connection. In Western culture, we really prioritize the hustle, the go, 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 moving, achieving, and that's fine. But I find that other cultures really prioritize that balance, that mentality of hustle to your demise, I want to say, that's built into our culture. And you can hear it in the way that we speak. You got to work twice as hard to get half as much. I'll sleep when I die. And when we don't think about that, it kind of keeps us on that hamster wheel and we don't get the opportunity to think. So I think that we need to examine that. I can tell you from talking to friends from Spain and different countries that they take long lunch breaks, they take long coffee breaks. They are not working through lunch like how we are, at least not typically. You know, in our culture, we work through lunch. There is something called a lunch and learn. So we're not actually taking a break from the work. It's again being on that hamster wheel. Now, a few years ago, I had the opportunity to visit China and I saw something that was like kind of strange. It shouldn't be, but it was. After dinner, a lot of the families, came out of their complexes and their homes and they just walked like together. I know. But that's what they did. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about all the benefits. You're walking. So that's helping with your digestion. It's preparing your body for rest. It's burning calories. It's doing all of these wonderful things physically. And then you also get the time to bond with your family members. Like there's no screen in front of you. You're just talking, connecting, asking questions, getting a deeper understanding and appreciation for the people that you love. Food as medicine, that is another thing that I've gotten the opportunity to see from other cultures and see the impact on our mental health. Our diet has an impact on our mental health, whether you want to believe it or not, but it affects the way that you sleep, your moods, clarity, focus, and a million other things. I've been fortunate enough to grow up with a family from the Caribbean. So I grew up seeing people that were very proud of the foods that they put in their body. And I grew up eating things that were fresh from the earth and nutrient rich. Conch salad, steamed fish, roast breadfruit, and herbs were also a really big part of my life as well. We drink things like soursop leaf tea to help with anxiety. We drink cerasee tea. If I ever got sick, if I ever got a cold, boy, my grandma would sop me up in some herbs and some alcohol, wrap me up in a blanket, and the next day I would be good as new. So, food is medicine is one concept. But the other thing that I really enjoyed about that was seeing how proud my family and my community were about the foods that they were putting in their body. I grew up going to the Bahamas and, going to Jamaica and 90 years old, straight white teeth, supple, youthful skin, still out in the garden, doing yard work, like walking miles and miles, and their minds were sharp as a tack. Baby, we got some 35-year-olds right here, some 30-year-olds, some 40-year-olds in this country that are struggling with a K. Okay, the body aches, mind fog, frustrated, and all of these things. And a lot of it is due to our the things that we're putting in our body. Okay, so this concept of food as medicine, I saw that outside of our culture. Now, don't get me wrong, because I used to live in the Midwest. I love me some good Kansas City barbecue. Give me a rib any day. Give me a nice medium rare steak. Give me a burger with pastrami on it. As y'all can tell, I love food. I love these things. My taste buds love these things, but I don't feel clear headed after I eat that. I don't feel focused. I feel sick and tired. My taste buds be happy, but I don't feel good. So we cannot act like the foods that we eat don't have an impact on our mental health. In many cultures, dancing, walking, boating, skiing, jogging, just simple things like that were integrated into the day. I remember being a child and walking miles and miles with my grandmother. I would go with her and we would jog on the beach. That was a normal part of life and there was no complaining. You just do it. Life for a lot of us now is so much more sedentary. A lot of us work from home. We're, working the 9 to 5. We're in an office at all times. You're seated. There's not a whole lot of room for movement. And even so, like, and I'm guilty of it too. Somebody will say, "Hey, let's go for a walk or let's take the stairs." And I'm like, "Oh my God, like it's too hot. I don't want to do that. Can we get the elevator?" We're guilty of it. But when you move your body, you're healthier. We know that. There's so much science behind it. We know that moving and exercise promotes neuroplasticity in the brain. Like it literally makes you more resilient, more flexible in your thinking. It increases self-esteem and it boosts those happy chemicals in the brain, endorphins and oxytocin and all them other happy chemicals that actually help with you feeling good, you being in a good mood. So if we think that movement is not a big part of improving our mental health, we lying to ourselves. And I think so many other cultures do a really good job of implementing that and integrating that into their lives. Another thing to focus on is community. I'm American, so I am conditioned to think in a very individualistic kind of way, and I guess that's okay. But when it's unbalanced in the way that it is today, that's when it becomes problematic. I grew up seeing intergenerational homes. You got 3 and 4 different generations in one house. And the way I see it, more hands, more wisdom, less isolation. Now, are there cons to living like that? Yeah. But we're not going to act like there aren't some benefits. You get to glean wisdom. You strengthen that in-person connection. You get that connection to heritage. It's different learning a recipe from your grandmother in her kitchen than through a computer screen. Like we know that. In other cultures where they prioritize togetherness and community, you see that the grandparents, the great grandparents are able and around to like retire and actually have a hand in raising their grandchildren. Less stressful for parents. It's a mood booster for the grandparents. But in our society where everyone is go, go, go and inflation and, our grandparents are still working at this point, it's kind of hard to have that. I want to give y'all an example. In one of the cities that I used to live in, my local grocer, is that the word? My local grocer, however you pronounce it, it's an African dude. And he hadn't seen me for months. And I finally came back after I had my baby. And he was like, "Oh my God, where have you been?" And I was like, "Oh, I just had a baby. So I was resting." And his face immediately dropped. And he was like, "I'm so sad for you." I was like, "Damn, like it's not what you typically say to like a postpartum mom." But I was like, "What you mean? Like, what you mean? Are you sad for me?" He said, because like you as American women, you guys are by yourself. In my village, the a new mother, barely does anything. She doesn't have to, because all the aunties and all the women from, all throughout the village come and they tend to her. They make sure that she has nutritious food. They're working around the clock to make sure all she got to do is breastfeed that baby. But everything else, the women are there. The community is there. So she's not by herself. And I'm sitting here with my baby on my back, like, damn, like that sounds pretty good. And my personal story, baby, that postpartum depression was not a game. And a big part of that was because, one, the hormonal stuff too. But the other thing is not having the community access, during that really, really vulnerable time. So we're not gonna sit here and act like community is not important and it doesn't have an impact on our mental health. In addition to that intergenerational care and like having that physical support, the financial piece. I grew up hearing things like ASU, partner, all that kind of stuff. This is where the community got together and they were basically their own banks. This is how you saw grandma and Mima and all them rest of them people were able to put a down payment on their house and pay for your college tuition and buy a car. That's because they worked together to be able to do that. Things like universal health care. That's pretty obvious, kind of speaks for itself. I know people right now that got ailments that cannot go to the doctor because they know that bill is going to set them back. And that's sad. You go to so many other countries where childcare, which is an enormous bill, it's an enormous stress, but it's subsidized or free in many places across the globe. You got things like paid parental leave when you have a baby. If I'm not mistaken, Japan is like up to 1 year. Spain is 16 weeks, and you get to keep 100% of your salary. Norway, I think, is up to, what is Norway? Norway is up to like 49 weeks, and you get to keep 100% of your salary. The whole idea is creating and maintaining systems for the collective good. When you know that you can rely on your community for help, it helps your mental health. Like, come on, don't argue with it because it's the truth. Finances and mental health. And you know what? I probably should have put this one first on the list, because for a lot of people, if you just had the money, you probably wouldn't have the problems that you got right now. If you're trying to figure out where your next meal is going to come from, if you are under the constant stress of trying to figure out how to pay your rent or your mortgage, you're having employment issues, you can't find a decent enough job to pay for your expenses, I can guarantee that you're going to have some mental health issues. Living in a constant state of stress has an impact on your brain and the way that it functions. Housing, food, clothing, shelter, these are basic human needs. And I don't care if you work at McDonald's, you should have access to the very basics, at least. It is baffling to me that we don't talk about the financial impact or the financial component of the mental health crisis in this country. When you live in poverty, you probably live in an unsafe neighborhood, which means that you're going to be more exposed to violent crime. You're going to have less access to healthy foods. It's probably going to be harder for you to find and network and, get to a higher paying job to be able to cover those basic needs, right? These things impact your mental health. So we need to be talking about that. Now, I don't know which countries and cultures do this the best. I don't know who has like the best finances in the world, but I can tell you the ones who are actually working towards it, their people probably have better mental health. I want you to imagine what your life would look like if your mind and your body was healthier. What would it look like if you could cover your expenses, have enough money left over to go on vacations, to invest, to do what the hell you want to do? How much better would your mental health be? How less stressed would you be? I really want us to take a look at what we're doing and what we say on a daily basis. I want you to recognize that what's normal in your culture may not necessarily be nurturing. And that's okay. I want you to recognize that you also don't have to stay in that. We talked about a lot of things in this video. The world is full of ways to rest and connect and recover. So if you heard something in this video that you think that you can implement into your life, do that, especially if you think it's going to be feasible. Give it a try. I want us to look outside of ourselves and the things that we have been taught, because that curiosity can very well save your mental health. Talkticians, we covered a lot today: spirituality, rest, food. You know that we are a community of people who are learning and who are growing every day. So you all let me know in the comments, what is one cultural practice that you're going to adopt and try this week? Talkticians, till next time.